Hello everyone, this is week 2, group 3 presentation on the social self by Taylor Blakeley. Okay, so I'll be summarizing all of our reading materials from the week. I broke them down into each section, that way you guys can get an overall summary of it instead of putting it all together. If I put it all together, it's going to be hard to follow along, so I just did it this way. So in chapter 3 of Casson, it discusses self-concept, self-esteem, and self-presentation. It talks about how we understand and how we view ourselves, how we can be influenced by other people's actions or behaviors, how culture is a factor in our self-concept and self-esteem, and how we present ourselves to others. In chapter 4, it discusses social perception, attribution, integration, and confirmation bias. It talks about figuring out how to understand and explain the behaviors of others, how we form impressions of others through physical appearances, nonverbal behavior, and perceptions of situations that people are in. It discusses attribution and goes over the theory of how to understand behavior, its bias, how culture affects attribution, and the motivational bias. This chapter also discusses integration, where somebody takes pieces from certain areas to form an overall impression of people. This can lead to confirmation bias, where we form a certain opinion or impression of somebody, and it'll be hard to change our perspective of them. Once we have this perception and this confirmation bias happens, it's hard to get rid of it because we are dead set on seeing that person that way. Both Corcoran and Mall discussed in Charity 2011 how they discuss different theories. Corcoran discusses the social comparison theory and several reasons why people compare themselves. They discuss with whom people usually compare themselves to, how it influences yourself, and ways to use the theory in an applied context. Mall discusses attribution theories. Theories that are discussed include theory of explanation, theory of attribution, of causal judgment, and the full conceptual theory of behavior explanation. Each theory gives guidance as to how attribution plays a critical role in people, interpret behavior, and the understanding of it. Okay, so this brings us to our journal summaries we had to read the week. Laxiak discusses negative word-of-mouth communication, or WOMC, with consumers' perception of towards a product. They found that certain brand names affects a person's attributions. This would be name brand clothing, it could be name brand something, that perception of that brand attributed to the behavior towards it. They also found that people received a negative message about a brand, the evaluation of the brand decreased. However, if the person receiving the negative message put their attention towards the person telling it, the brand increased. That was pretty interesting. Volkenberg discusses issues of well-being and social self-esteem with adolescents utilizing friend networking sites. They found friend networking sites had a negative effect on adolescents' self-esteem when they received negative feedback on the profiles from other people. However, they also found that positive feedback on adolescents' profiles resulted in higher self-esteem. So friend networking sites can be beneficial to adolescents if feedback they receive stays positive and doesn't switch to negative. Okay, to give you a basic summary of what each person discussed, Casson discusses all the concepts mentioned, self-esteem, attribution theory, everything. Ahmad discusses the attribution theories. Corcoran discusses the social comparison theory. Valkenburg discusses self-esteem and social well-being. Alaxiak discusses the attribution theory. So it's a quick rundown of what each of them discuss, so it helps you understand it better, and if you have to go back to look at something, you can. Okay, so now we move on to self-concept. Self-concept is described as the sum total of beliefs that people have about themselves. This is basically a question of who am I? Am I a kind person to others? Am I a good husband or wife? It all depends on how we see ourselves. That's our self-concept. It's mainly made up of self-schemas. Self-schemas are the beliefs we have of ourselves and helps with processing the information we believe. So, do you see yourself as overweight or underweight? Do you see yourself as quiet or loud? It helps you process what you believe to be about yourself. Okay, self-concept kind of goes along with self-esteem. Self-esteem is described as our positive and negative evaluations of ourselves. Self-esteem plays a role in a social context by other people having influence over the perception we have of ourselves. So if we receive positive comments, our self-esteem will increase. If we receive negative comments, our self-esteem will decrease. This is similar to what Valkenburg found with the adolescents in the friend networking sites. If they got positive comments on their profile, their self-esteem got higher. They got negative comments on their profile, their self-esteem got lower. So self-esteem does lower when you go through adolescence, but rises throughout adulthood. Why? Adolescence, you're still developing, puberty, things along that line. Adulthood, we're more mature, our brain's fully developed by 25, so we should have higher self-esteem by then. Also, culture is a factor in self-esteem. If you're raised in a positive culture, your self-esteem is likely to be higher. If you're raised in a negative culture, your self-esteem is probably going to be lower. So culture does play an important role in self-esteem. Okay, social comparisons is where people evaluate themselves through comparisons with similar others. Most of us tend to compare certain areas of our life to another person's life. We compare ourselves to others to better evaluate our own life, maintain a positive image, or help us improve ourselves. We usually compare ourselves to somebody we can look up to and idolize, somebody similar to us, or somebody that is less fortunate than we are. Every time we compare ourselves, we usually have a motive behind why we're doing it. There's always a reason behind doing it. And this can either have a positive or negative effect on us depending on what we compare our life to with another's and how we process and perceive the similarities and differences. Now, this is huge for self-esteem. Okay, now we move on to strategic self-presentation, which consists of our efforts to shape others' impressions in specific ways in order to gain influence, power, sympathy, or approval. We have a desire to want to have a good relationship with others and be liked. We dress up for a job interview or to get personal pictures taken. So why do we dress up for a job interview? Because obviously besides getting a job, we want to make a good first impression. We want to make people believe that we fit in with the organization, that we fit the culture of the organization, and things along that line. Same thing with professional pictures taken. We take professional pictures to make ourselves more presentable. My opinion is the goal of strategic self-presentation is to make a good first impression that will make us stand out among others. Okay, so the last topic we're going to discuss is the attribution theory. The attribution theory is where people try to understand why people behave the way they do. This is a big factor in social perception. I talked about earlier with Mall 2011, discussed the different theories about understanding behaviors of others. The attribution theory is actually not one theory, it's several theories that combine together and they sum up the understanding behaviors of others. So it's not just one theory, it's several theories. An attribute is a way of saying understand or can explain a certain behavior. That's why they call it the attribution theory, way of understanding behavior. So these can fall into either a personal or situational category. When we are negative towards something or someone without knowing the circumstances, we make it personal. If we are trying to just justify why we did a certain thing that is negative, we are making it situational. Okay, to sum everything up, the topics discussed in more detail all help give us an understanding of ourselves and understand why we behave the way we do as humans. Self-concept helps us understand the overall view we have of ourselves, like the who am I kind to other people, etc. Along with how we view ourselves, there are other factors that affect our self-esteem. Other people can influence our self-esteem by giving us positive or negative comments about ourselves. Age is a factor in self-esteem. The older you are, the more mature you are, the more self-esteem you should have. If the younger, like adolescence, teenage years, lower self-esteem because you go through puberty and things along that line. Culture is a big one. The culture you're exposed to affects your self-esteem in a big way, and so your environment. Okay, so our self-esteem is also affected by comparing ourselves to others. We compare areas of our lives to others to evaluate our own life, maintain a positive image in the eyes of others or ourselves, or to help us improve areas of our life. We choose to compare to people who we perceive are equal, better, and or less fortunate than we are. Every time we compare ourselves to somebody else, there's a motive behind it. There's a reason why we do it. And this can either lead to us having a positive effect or negative effect from it. It all depends on how we see the differences or similarities when we compare. This also leads to developing a strategic self-presentation of ourselves to others. Okay, so why do we want to self-presentate to others? We want to make good impressions on people and want to fit in. So self-presentation correlates with our self-concept, self-esteem, and comparing ourselves to others. All these tie together to focus on ourselves and how we see others and ourselves. So understanding these concepts helps us understand our attributes, which leads to the attribution theory, how we understand situations, react to them, understand the behaviors of other people, ultimately affect our self-concept, self-esteem, how we compare ourselves to others, and how we represent ourselves to others. So the main purpose of this was to get understanding of ourselves, how to read behavior from other people, and know behavior within ourselves. So now that we went over all the reading materials for the week, the book, the articles, everything, why do we as humans feel a need to compare ourselves to others instead of just utilizing our own self-concept? Do you feel it is more beneficial or detrimental to compare ourselves to others? The Bible discusses how God can lift us up when we are feeling down. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. What are two Bible verses, excluding the one I shared, do you use when you are feeling down and need help raising your self-esteem? Okay, and these are just the references used throughout the presentation.